Hello and welcome to the Monday edition of DCU Tonight. I am your host, Rock Var, here on the couch with Hippolyta Kent, live on Var Nation, playing DCUO and getting ready to enjoy another great week of DC TV and DC Comics in the wonderful world that we live in. So thanks for joining us. Again, we're about several things starting in DCUO. And we're going to wrap up Legends of Tomorrow from last week because we didn't get to touch on that on the last show because we hadn't seen it yet. And we're going to talk about what's in store for Supergirl tonight, leading right up to the show. It should be pretty cool. Tonight's episode of Supergirl should be phenomenal. We'll get into that a little bit more in detail. But the big news in DCUO, obviously, we are live with PC. So we're playing live right now with PC players, and PlayStation players are able to hang out in-game together, go do missions together, join each other's leagues, voice chat, trade, all of the great stuff that you've wanted to do for so long, you can now do in DCUO. And that happened Friday of last week, I believe. And then we had the huge DCUO block party that we actually got to see Meps live on the show, and a lot of other famous YouTubers and gamers from the PC side as well as the PlayStation side. So it was a lot of fun and a huge turnout for that event. The devs spawned Trigon. They spawned Trigon and Necron together. It was amazing. And we've got video footage of that we'll get onto the channel this week. I didn't do anything with it this weekend, but we'll get that up on Var Nation. We'll do several different things, mostly just show you what it looked like, because it was phenomenal. If you were there live, you know how cool it was. If you didn't get to see it, the extra cool thing, on top of Meps just dropping in out of nowhere and playing hide and seek with with members, or not just members but players, we had a really cool thing happen. They gave us all a special gift for being there, and it was called a sparkler, but it looked like fireworks. And so then everyone started shooting off those fireworks, and that just continued for like a good 2.5 to 3 hours as far as I can tell. I kept going back, and there was still chaos happening. Eventually Lyda disconnected because of all of it. My screen was just going absolutely crazy. The chat was blinking in and out. Colors were awry. It was mass chaos, and I knew that eventually I would disconnect as well. So I ended up taking off, and we went and did some of the new content that dropped in episode 21, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We haven't done the raid yet, but we did the duo several times, and it is a lot of fun. DC Legends of Tomorrow themed, and the difficulty's just right. It's not a bear to get through, but it's fun. It's enough to be challenging. And not real great drops happening right now, but other than that, it is a lot of fun. You get to play with Hawkgirl, and you get to play with Heatwave. You get to see Hawkman. You get to beat down on Abracadabra, and that's always fun too. So, but we'll go into that in more detail. But right now, the effects of PC, the effects of playing with PCers in DCUO. I don't know if you can still see it now. This is where everybody has to come to do the seasonal right now. Love conquers all, but right now it's not really what I would call hopping. A few minutes ago, though, it was absolute chaos in here. So right now, the seasonal event, Love Conquers All, we didn't end up getting the videos out showing the base items, so I'll go through that a little bit right now and show them to you. But you can come to Gotham's East End Police Station, talk to Hal Jordan. He's got a mission that you accept, and you go outside and you do the mission, and then there's one that you queue for as well. There's a race in Metropolis, and all three of those things get you hearts, and then you can come over to the vendor here beside Hal and spend those hearts, and what you can get are several things. We've got the Jester t-shirt. That's kind of cool. I'm not going to really worry about it too much, but a lot of these things are for feats, so it's the base item feats, and they have some really cool base items this year, starting with I'm going to call it, that's not a candelabra, is it?
No, it's a candlestick with rose.
Okay. But I wanted to say candelabra.
I think a candlestick.
Candlestick with
lots of candles.
Oh.
I could be wrong.
Okay, so that's where get a white silky bow.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite.
Awesome.
Well, that's my second favorite. I've really been wanting a window that has a cool kind of scene in the background that looks, I don't know if that's a beach, but it reminds me of a beach. I think it's the water. I don't know. Get a chair with a sash on it, or a bow. And they're not ridiculously priced, so, 4 hearts. I think you can get 5 per day total, so. Unless you spend replay badges. I want a bunch of these. I want to line an entire room with those. I'm going to make a drunk tank room. Like it's just going to be, well, actually the bar. It'd be cool to have those at the bar.
Oh, yeah.
VAR bar. Valentine's Day card box. I got this last night. Because I want to put it up in the front room of my house. And that way, when I have visitors, they have to drop me a card. Or they're not my Valentine. Be like, are you my Valentine? Then you can't come in. I need a card in the box, mister. Or Mrs. I can't really see those. There we go. That is Tizite. Now, I would like to put several of these together and make it like round and put the champagne bottles in the middle of that so that you'd have like 3 champagne bottles and then you'd have tables facing it and the chairs around would end up making a circle because of the way they are, or somewhat of a circle. So I'm going to do that. And then we can put like the heart-shaped beds in there too. So it can be like a party room. Because we're going to have our Valentine's Day in game.
Yep.
Our characters will get all romantic and they'll lay down and cuddle with each other on the bed. It'll be awesome. Oh, there's the arrow through the head. I want that too. Quiver. That's a good looking quiver too, so some of the people who are arrows may want that. Or Green Arrow inspired, or and then these are old from last year. Yep, so that's a
I love it.
yeah. So that's all the new base items. You can get a feat for collecting them. And again, you can do that. Love Conquers All. We'll go outside. Well, that's a different stream, really, where we're going to do the Love Conquers All in its entirety, all 3 things, back to back to back. But right now, I want to go over to Little Bohemia for the rest of the show, because if you haven't been to Little Bohemia since the merge happened, you need to go. It's It's been ridiculous out there. There's been just hanging out, PvPN craziness. I'm going to go to, I don't want to go inside. Well, yeah. So that's the news in DCUO, really. Outside of that, the mail, I think, is still an issue. I think they're still having issues with mail. I know that when Lida logs in on PS3 every day, it tells her she has mail, and she goes and checks it, and there's no mail there. That could be the effect of somebody having sent you something that isn't coming through.
Oh.
I'm thinking, because that's the big issue now, is when things are, I don't know. Could be. But the next part of the show, that obviously I said was the DC Universe Online news that we have right now. If I think of anything else throughout the show, I'll bring it up. But for DCUO news, you can always go to DCUniverseOnline.com and check the announcements section on the forums, and there you can get all the news you need to know pretty much about DCUO. So, see, there's quite a bit of activity here right now. It's not as crazy as it was the other night. I think towards the end of the day it gets more excitement. Plus, that was a Sunday. I was really shocked, though, that as many people were online yesterday during the Super Bowl as there were. But the server was pretty hopping. So, but this is normally the big hangout for iconic characters and stuff like that on DCUO. You can see, if we start scrolling through the names, you'll see some pretty iconic ones throughout the background here. A lot of times the various Justice Leagues hang out here, and the JLAs and the JSAs and the Bat families, and pretty much every, this is where you go if you're looking to get into an iconic league and you've got a outfit that you want to show off. So we'll do the rest of the show from here today anyway, just because I'm getting a little tired of looking at the same background every time I watch it, and I have to wonder if people watching the videos are thinking the same thing, like every time we see this same background. But we did catch up on Legends of Tomorrow over the weekend. You can do the same if you missed it last week on CW.com or CWTV.com, .tv.com. And so we're going to move over to that portion today, or now, and talk a little bit about what happened and kind of speculations for this coming week. If you haven't seen yet and you don't want spoilers, now's the time for you to leave. Unfortunately, pop back in here in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll be talking about DC Comics and Supergirl things to come for tonight's episode. It's just a little bit under less than an hour. And if you're watching the show live now, Supergirl will be on CBS. We've got a brand new show tonight for the girl who has everything, and we'll talk a little bit in a little while about how that's inspired from Superman comics. Right now I'm getting rear-ended by a taxi. Live TV, everybody. That's what happens when you're just hanging out on the street in Metropolis. Sometimes. That was a pretty neat looking taxi. See there, you can see Supergirl, JL behind me. I'll point some of them out as I see them. But anyway, in this week's Legends of Tomorrow, there's obviously several themes again. The team, I really like how they're doing this, where the team's splitting up and they're going to do their own side missions. And we see, it's kind of like a soap opera. We see these little individual pieces, and then at the end, they all kind of team up and defeat the bad guy normally together. But this week we had several themes when it came to what was going on in the episode. The first and foremost, Ray Palmer. The majority of this episode for Ray was about finding his confidence and kind of believing in himself. He's still dwelling on the loss of his wife and the fact that he couldn't help her. And when we go to the DC Comics section of the show, we'll talk a little bit more about that connection and the connection to Ray Palmer's stint on Arrow. But he's still very much dwelling on that, and he's got a lot of self-doubt as a result of it, so he's really afraid to take very many risks. It's kind of, we saw this extreme confidence out of Ray in the beginning of his run on Arrow, and we kind of saw that at the beginning of his run on Legends of Tomorrow, but now it's kind of like he's gotten out there and he's crossed the line, and he feels like he's in a place where he can really affect people's lives, and it scares him. He realizes that he's just a guy that made this suit that has a lot of very unconventional powers that really haven't been tested, and here he is jumping in trying to do something extreme, which in this situation he's going into Hawkgirl's bloodstream to try and break up the shards that are still in there, making their way to her heart, and once that happens, she's going to die. So he's got to get to these microscopic shards and break them up. So he's got to shrink down, microscopic, go into a needle, be injected into her bloodstream, and then fly through her bloodstream, find these shards, and then he's shooting them with a pulse cannon, basically. And he realizes that he's very ill-equipped to deal with problems that might arise by doing that. And not only that, but he can cause huge problems for her outside of her pretty much imminent death that's happening right now. What could he do? He could, laser through her artery and cause internal bleeding. He could do all kinds of things. And so he comes to that realization, and he says, I'm not doing it. He goes in, he has a bit of an issue with his suit, and he comes back out and tells Stein basically he's not going to move forward with it because of the things that could happen. And so it's at this point that Stein does what he does best, which seems to be build confidence in people. The problem being that he doesn't, we don't find out till a little bit later, but he ends up lying to Ray and telling him that he remembered him being in his class and kind of talking about how brilliant he was and how he expected great things from him and stuff like that. And that then builds confidence in Ray. He believes in himself because this great doctor believes in him, and so he goes forward with what he's doing, and he succeeds, and then finds out later that it was all a lie. And I was pretty surprised when he found out that it was a lie, that he wasn't a bit more angered than he was. I mean, he didn't seem very pissed about it. I would have been a little bit more pissed about it. Like, dude, you just completely lied to me. And it's kind of funny that Stein's reaction is, I had a lot of brilliant students, basically. There's no way I'm going to remember them all. And that's probably true. He's super smart, and he's a good role model for the younger heroes, and he's good at his part on the team. And we're going to talk about, when we go to the DC Comics portion, or the DC TV Secrets portion of this episode, we'll learn a little bit more about kind of the comedy and the at least one of the jokes that was brought up during that interaction. So the other big part of the episode is the team. We talked about last show, you know, that they basically just cut and run and left Hawkman there for Vandal to do pretty much whatever he wanted to the body. And so they addressed that immediately. In the beginning of the show, they're going back. They're going back after his body, and they're going to... They don't know what they're going to do with it, but at least give him a proper burial or something, you know. I don't see any plans of a resurrection on their end happening right now, but what they find is, when they go to rescue the body, Vandal's already got it. So now they are thrust straight into a conflict with him, and he is using the blood, and that we find out that not only does he drain the essence or the life force, and that helps him be immortal, but he's figured out over the years that if he takes the blood of Hawkman and gives it to a few of his choice followers, that it will extend their lives as well. It doesn't make them immortal, but it does extend their lives by about 100 years, I think he said. So that's why he's got such a strong following. He's got this, they decide that one of the ways that they can take him out is to limit his finances, because he's just a guy. In the end, he's immortal, yes, but he doesn't really have any powers, and he's just a guy. So without money, he doesn't have much of anything, and they find out that that's wrong, that what really makes him powerful is not the money at all, it's his followers. And the reason that he has this really, really strong, devoted cult following is that he's been giving people, 100 plus years added to their life. So they look at him and they believe that he's like this savior. I don't know if they really believe that he's a savior, but they think of him as a leader. He's an immortal. Imagine if you found someone in the world that you came in contact with that was actually immortal, and they said, follow me, my son, and I will make you, live a long time. It'd be a tempting offer to stay youthful for 100 years or more, or at least have it. And that's the question I would ask. Wait, it's gonna extend my life by 100 years. Is that gonna be like the end of my life type of years? So am I gonna be like a really, really, really old man for the last 100? So I gotta live until I'm like 80 or 90, until, I'm having old people problems, and then I got to continue to have old people problems for another 100 years? Or does it make me stay youthful? That would be the deciding factor. But at any rate, he's got a huge following because of this, and these people are deathly devoted to him, and that's what's going to make him pretty much unstoppable, because even if they do manage to take out Vandal Savage, he's got 4 or 5 guys that have extra long lives that are going to be around, either continuing his work, or my guess is figuring out a way to get him resurrected in some way, which if they come across Ra's al Ghul at any point, then they're going to be able to do it that way. Unless it's Malcolm Merlyn in this world, then I don't know. Sarah, we deal again with Sarah in this episode, dealing with her place on the team. She has this rage, she has this bloodlust that needs to be filled, and it scares her. And so she is coming to grips with not only how to deal with her situation, but how to, what her place on the team is. And it's pretty important. I mean, she's the enforcer of the team pretty much. They can't really rely on Captain Cold and Heatwave at this point. They can rely on them in spurts when they need something, but long term, they're not really devoted. But, she's literally a second in command at this point, it seems like. And as long as her team works with her and keeps her under control and gets her, stopped before she brutally murders everyone, there won't be a problem. So it's just a matter of her finding her little niche in that dynamic that keeps things level. And that's, I think, what we're going to see her struggle with, and what we're going to see the team struggle with over time. But they've already got that happening. That you can say that that's happening with Sarah, but it's also happening with Heat and Cold. I mean, those guys, they're not really even trying to fight their nature. Here she is. She's actually trying to fight her nature, or her created nature. They're not really trying to fight it that much, or we think. I would argue that Heatwave probably isn't at all. Captain Cold, I feel like, is in a constant struggle with himself. And it makes for some very interesting changes to the way that he and Heatwave are going to react with each other and with the rest of the team. Because now it's kind of, we've seen Snart is kind of the chain that Heatwave is on. And he has to tug on that chain quite often. But trying to do a good thing here, I guess, Leonard, he realizes that he has a golden opportunity through this time travel to stop his father from making a huge mistake and doing what he feels has sent his family down a spiraling path of devastation. So Snart goes to his home. He ends up running into a younger version of himself, has some words of wisdom for himself, and then runs into his father. And the big thing here is he's very pissed at his father for, he feels, ruining his life. The story goes that his dad goes and tries to rob this crystal from the museum, or steal this crystal from the museum, and he gets caught. He goes to jail for 5 years. When he comes out, he's very bitter and mean, and he abuses his children and his wife, and that causes this whole spiral of the family. So he wants to prevent that from happening, so Leonard goes and he steals the crystal and he takes it to his dad. And he says, here, this will stop you basically from ruining my life. Here it is. You don't have to get busted, whatever. And he finds out that that's very, very wrong, because as we heard in the beginning of the show, time tries to right itself. It's going to be a constant battle when they make these changes to keep the changes made, because what happens is Snart's dad tries to sell the thing, gets caught. I think he sells it to an undercover cop, and ends up going to jail for 5 years anyway. So things are going to remain the same, and that's kind of a big bit of foreshadowing for the whole show. I think, really, they've got, they're trying to change history, and I don't know that they're going to be successful in doing that, because time has proven over and over again to right itself on the show. So when they make this big change, and if they end up taking down Vandal Savage or foiling his plans or whatever it is that they do, is it going to stick? Because, are these guys doomed for the rest of existence to travel through time and stop Vandal Savage over and over and over and over again? And what's going to happen when they inevitably die or meet their... It's a time paradox. But that is DC's Legends of Tomorrow, guys. The show is Thursday nights on the CW. And we have a new episode this week. If you'd like to talk about the show in more detail, you can visit KryptonSite.com. Go to the forums and talk about spoilers and speculation. The next episode, get news about the next episode that's coming, and take part in the live discussion thread during the episode, which I'm going to encourage you to do for Supergirl Tonight, which actually starts in about 44 minutes until Supergirl. So tonight's episode, and I think when we move over to this next section of the show for the DC Comics, we're going to learn about what's going on tonight's episode and get some history on this event. But first, before we do that, we should go to the DC TV secrets for this week on Legends of Tomorrow, because we just wrapped that up, and we will then move on to Supergirl. So the DC secrets this week: Rip Hunter and Sarah take a different tactic to slow Vandal Savage down. They try to freeze his finances, and the process leads them to new discoveries, including Rip's previous encounter with Savage, and that he conveniently kept to himself. Rip's attempt at taking Savage's life isn't the only mystery in the episode. They're here to blow the lid off some other secrets. So jump into the bloodstream is the first secret here about Ray Palmer, and we talked about that a little bit. A tiny solution solves the big problem of the dagger shards pushing towards Kendra's heart. The Atom shrinks himself to enter Kendra's bloodstream, and it's not the first time we've seen Ray Palmer use this technique to save a life. In one example from World's Finest number 236, the Atom is called upon to destroy a virus caused by tiny life forms called the Germ Men. Lacking the proper controls on his costume, the Atom had to rely upon Superman to essentially squish him down with a clap in order to atomize him and inject him into an infected girl's bloodstream. That is awkward. So Superman had to pimp smack the Atom down to size to get him. How did that work? Wouldn't that have killed him? I don't know. To read that and find out. World's Finest number 236. So here's the interesting thing that I was talking about with Professor Stein. It says, look out for the iceberg. Rake cracks a joke about the Titanic to Professor Stein when he's talking about going through the bloodstream, and he's looking for this huge shard, and he's like, this is kind of like we're steering the Titanic into the iceberg. And the reason that's a little bit especially amusing is because Victor Garber, who plays Dr. Stein, also played Thomas Andrews in the 1997 film Titanic. And I did not know that. Dr. Stein was in Titanic. Will you sing for us the Titanic song, Lyda? Did you? It says Rip Hunter has quite the taste for artifacts. You may notice in this week's episode, Rip Hunter has traveled along the timeline, and some of the artifacts he's collected in his travels serve as decorations in his parlor. The DC Comics Instagram has been dropping hints about the Easter egg-filled decor, including Ma Hunkle's red tornado helmet, and they've got a picture of it here, was in this week's episode. So, it says you can see all of them by clicking on the link here. Pause your screen when Rip's parlor is on the screen to see if you can spot the helmet and other relics in the background. Share your discoveries on Twitter with hashtag DCTV. So that's pretty cool. And Ray's lost fiancée, one of the big themes of this episode. We know Ray lost his fiancée Anna during Slade Wilson's siege of Starling City in Arrow. He mentions that her last name is Loring. This is a nod to Ray's life in the comics, where the Atom married attorney Jean Loring. A different character named Jean Loring appeared in Arrow. She was apparently a lawyer friend of Moira? I can't say that. Moira Queen. So very interesting. But that was not to be Ray's wife on this show. They just used the same name. And this is about Vandal Savage and when he's taken the blood from Hawkman, they made a reference to Jack the Ripper. Vandal Savage has had hundreds of lifetimes to learn from the best, brightest, and most terrible. He mentions picking up a method of severing the carotid artery from Jack the Ripper. The comic book version of Vandal claimed to have been responsible for a number of travesties, including using the alias of Jack the Ripper during Victoria-era London. That is, of course, a reference to the unidentified serial killer active in the Whitechapel area of London in 1888. So, but in the comics, and I think several different, not just the comics, but in several different forms of media, it's been stated that Vandal Savage was indeed Jack the Ripper. But in this version, he apparently learned from Jack the Ripper. Whoa! Check out that Batman crystal. Oh, no, it's not Batman. That's very cool, though. If you just joined the show, we're live at Little Bohemia Police Station in Metropolis for this DCU Tonight. We're wrapping up the Legends of Tomorrow section of the show. Tonight's episode of Supergirl is about to air here at 8 o'clock on CBS. We're excited for the show. It's called For the Girl Who Has Everything. And in tonight's Supergirl, Kara falls under the influence of an alien parasite that feeds off of her while causing her to undergo enticing hallucinations about the life she could have had. If that sounds familiar to you, there's a good reason. The episode, For the Girl Who Has Everything, is an adaptation of For the Man Who Has Everything, a classic Superman story from no less than the creators of Watchmen, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And in that, Superman undergoes a very similar hallucination, and if you're familiar with that comic, you're probably familiar with, or if you watched Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, you're probably familiar with the episode where this happens, and it's again titled For the Man Who Has Everything. So that's what's happening tonight on Supergirl. I'm not going to go into all of this about the comic. If you want to read about what happened to Superman in that comic, go to DCComics.com and check it out. There's a very good article there by Tim Beadle, and he talks about, the comic and what we may expect in Supergirl. There's also a couple of clips that you might want to check out before tonight's episode. If you go to KryptonSite.com, you can see a clip of what's going on in tonight's Supergirl. You can also see a clip of Tom Welling talking about potentially, I think he wants to be on Supergirl. He's still saying nobody's asked him. Come on, somebody ask him, would you? Hurry up. I'm asking you. So now he can't say nobody's asked him. I've asked you to be on Supergirl, but I have absolutely nothing to do with the show, nor does my decision matter in any way. So what are you going to do? So that's tonight starting at 8 o'clock on CBS. We'll wrap things up in this episode of DCU Tonight by going and checking out the DC Comics pull list for the week. If you go to DCComics.com, it's very simple. You just have to scroll down to about halfway down the page, and you're going to find the pull list. This week, Batman number 49 is on sale on the 10th. All of these are on sale on the 10th except for the last one. It's already available. But Batman number 49, Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 3, and Justice League Gods and Monsters, which is available now. The other two available on the 10th, and that is the DC Comics pull list for this week. So we'll be back on again Wednesday. We'll talk about what went on Supergirl and Flash. Big week in Flash. You've got to tune in Tuesday. They're going to Earth 2. It looks like mass chaos. It's going to be phenomenal, so don't miss Flash this week. We've got Arrow on Wednesday, DC's Legends of Tomorrow on Thursday, and so it's another full week of DC TV, another great week in DC Comics, and it's been wonderful hanging out with you guys here. It's going to be awesome in DCUO. We're going to go do the seasonal and probably try to get some marks to get some of that new vendor gear, the new Static Shock-inspired vendor gear, which we'll show off on later episodes. So that's DCU Tonight. Our goal is to keep you up to speed with everything that happens in the DC universe and to have fun while we do it. So you can learn more about us. We have a website, it's VarNation, DCUO.com. You can get some information on us. If you want to help support our channel, please share and like our videos. Subscribe. It always helps to subscribe. We were up to 135 subscribers now, and we're thankful to each and every one. You can help support us there on YouTube by clicking on the support button, or you can visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/VarNation. But, you know, most importantly, just watch the show, share and like it, subscribe if you can, and hang out with us because we're lonely and we like you. We don't know you, but we love you. And we definitely want to thank DCUO this week. Number one, the event of our life, seeing Meps, having Meps on our show live, even though he wasn't really on the show, he was just there. We caught him live. That was the most awesome experience of our lives. And we want to thank DCUO and thank the devs and thank everybody that came out to that block party, to the meet and greet. It was awesome. I believe the DCUO Sourcecast was even live from there that night. And the turnout was just insane. Just an insane amount of people were there. So it was great. But yeah, so that's it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. For Hippolyta Kent, this is Rock Var saying peace out.
Peace out.